Today's guest is in charge of protecting the sport fishing for what is known as the top salmon rivers in the country. 97-pound king salmon have been landed here. Giant 20 and 30-inch rainbows have made dreams come true. And this place is also known for the Suicide Run, a multi-day fishing adventure where people stay up all night, getting their limit and getting their limit again the next day. Today, you're going to find out what you can do to protect these fish species and the fish species in your home waters and the fish you love. This is the Wet Fly Swing Podcast, where I show you the best places to travel to for fly fishing, how to find the best resources and tools to prepare for that big trip, and what you can do to give back to the fish species you love. Hey, I'm Dave, host of the Wet Fly Swing Podcast. I've been fly fishing since I was a kid. I grew up around a little fly shop and have created one of the largest fly fishing podcasts in this country. I've also interviewed more of the greatest fly anglers and conservation-minded people than just about anyone out there. Shannon Martin, Executive Director of the Kenai Sport Fishing Association, is here to take us into Alaska and behind the scenes in what they are doing to assure you have a shot at fishing this magical place and catching some big fish this year. We get an update on the Chinook status in this area and what they're doing to help protect them. We hear about these boardwalks they're making, how these boardwalks are protecting the off-channel habitats for salmon, why they're so important, and how actually river users are impacting these areas. Plus, you're going to hear about FishHound expeditions and the trip they are planning, and we are planning to head up north to Alaska. This is going to be a road trip. This is going to be a chance for you to get involved if you can. This is going to be a great one. Looking forward to it. Here we go. Nothing better than Alaska King Salmon. Let's jump into it with Shannon Martin from KRSA.com. How you doing, Shannon?
Hey, I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Great. It's really good to have you on here today. We are going to be talking about a very important topic around back to Alaska, which is pretty much, I think, the favorite place for most everybody that listens to this. I think it's on everybody's bucket list. If they haven't been there, they want to go there. If they've been there, they want to go back as much as possible. So we're going to talk about your mission and what you do up there, but part of it is supporting, protecting the fish species, that we all love. So we're going to talk about all that and talk about KRSA, and some of the stuff you have going, which sounds like you're pretty busy. But before we get there, talk about fly fishing first. How did you get into fly fishing? What's your first memory? And then we'll take it into KRSA.
Sure. So I'm a second-generation Alaskan, lifelong, born and raised here. So fishing has always been a part of my life, since I was a kid. But about 15 years ago, my brother retired from the Army, and he started spending more time on the river, and he got into fly fishing. And of course, little sister wanted to go along, and I accompanied him and fell in love with fishing the Kenai on the fly. It's a bit addicting, as you know. The tug is the drug.
Yep, it is. What were the species? I mean, the Kenai is known for, it's probably most known for Chinook. I've fished it a couple times, but it's like, I know Chinook runs are kind of, there's challenges now, but Chinook, what are the species you were fishing for when you first got started?
For rainbow trout. There's trophy size rainbows here on the Kenai because the Kenai is so blessed with the runs of sockeye salmon and coho. The trout tend to grow very large based off of their eating habits.
Yep, that's it. So you have rainbow, and you pretty much have everything. And the cool thing about the Kenai, what is it about the Kenai that makes it so special? Because I know a lot of people talk about maybe it's the greatest river in the world for salmonids. What are your thoughts there? Why is it different than maybe some other places?
Well, it's highly accessible to the public. So there's over 15 public access points, and it's over 80 miles long. And it's within 2 hours of Anchorage, Alaska, which is our international airport. So for folks that are visiting, or even, Anchorage is our largest city, folks that want to come down and visit and drop a line in, we're only talking about a 2.5-hour drive to world-class fishery. This is where the world record king salmon was caught back in the late 80s.
Oh,
it's
wow.
97 pounds.
Jeez.
And the record still stands.
97 pounds. That's a giant. I've seen some fish that are 50 pounds Chinook, and when you see one, you're like, whoa, that looks weird, right? It looks like it shouldn't be that big. I can't imagine 100. Have you ever seen anything? What does that look like? What's the biggest fish you've seen? Have you ever seen the 100-pound fish?
Well, they just make everything bigger in Alaska. So
yeah.
I've seen 200-pound halibut.
Right.
I just pulled in a 45-pound lingcod last week.
Wow.
it's just amazing fisheries up here. But specifically on the Kenai, getting that access. Sometimes our day use areas or our boat launches, there's no fee involved. So
Mm.
you have access to this world-class fishery within a couple of hours from the major city in Alaska.
Yeah.
And it looks like a postcard when you visit it. I'm sure that, folks listening can look up pictures, but because the Kenai River is glacially fed, it has silt that runs up in it, and it's a cloudy turquoise color. And when the sunlight hits that, and then you've got your snow-capped mountains, maybe there's a moose in the background or a bear that's fishing for salmon.
Yeah.
It's
God,
pretty
that
amazing.
is amazing. So that's what it is. I mean, Alaska is Alaska. It's this gigantic state. I can't remember some of the numbers you probably know on, but how big it is, like, compared to Texas, and things like that. But the cool thing is
Yeah,
it's
Texas
Alaska.
can fit inside.
Is that what it is? How much bigger is it than
Yeah.
Texas?
Gosh, I
We'll have to
don't know
we'll have to
off
put
the
them
top of
back.
my head.
We'll do some research, put in the show notes. But yeah, it's massive. But the cool thing is that a lot of Alaska, well, it isn't accessible, right? That's what makes it amazing, because you got to fly in a lot. But Kenai is accessible. That's the thing. You could drive to this, you can fish it. So you're basically getting a world-class fishery that everybody can access if they can fly to Anchorage, is pretty much the deal.
Mm-hmm. And the entry fee is low. So I could come down and fish a weekend and get my family's supply of salmon to feed us for the year. I don't have to spend $3,000, $4,000, get a private charter and go out to like remote Alaska off the road system. This is something I can do in a day. We call them suicide runs, where you get off work at 5 p.m. in Anchorage, hop in your car, go down, catch your limit. When the clock hits midnight, catch your next
Oh
day's
man,
limit, and then head home.
that is awesome. The suicide run. That one is going in the show notes for sure. So we got the suicide run, which sounds fun. Now, is that something that's more suited for the kids, or are we seeing like older 50, 60 year old people doing this?
No, people of all ages participate in the sockeye fishery. There's forecasted 3.3 million sockeye that are going to be returning to the Kenai this year, which is an average run.
Yeah.
Right now, we're in the thick of it. July in Alaska, this is peak sockeye time. And the town is just filling up with folks, Alaskans, non-residents. And then also we have what's known as a personal use fishery. It's a dip net fishery. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, I have. I don't know much about it though.
So it's only for Alaska residents, but it gives them an opportunity to utilize a 5-foot wide hoop net and scoop out the salmon for harvest.
Mm-hmm.
So my household, for example, it's based on households. You get 25 for the head of the household and then an additional 10 for each dependent. So my husband and our 3 kids, we can have 65 fish if we'd like.
If you'd like. Yeah.
Typically with all the other species and hunting that we do, we take about 14, and I usually get them on rod and reel.
Gotcha. So that is interesting, because I think that, and we're going to talk a little about maybe focus a little bit on Chinook. We've talked a lot about fly fishing for Chinook. We've had some of the best fly anglers in the world that have been on the podcast. And so we've covered that, but I really want to talk about the changes, because I think everybody's a little worried about Chinook because there's closures. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things I remember. And you could look down the lower 48 and look at the Columbia River. You could look at any major basin, and people said back 100 years ago, like, this would never go away. Right. And now there aren't any sockeye that make it up to Idaho and stuff like that. So, but I think Alaska, the people did the same thing. I think they said, well, Alaska is never going to run out of fish. And we're starting to see that. Are you worried about, you see Chinook, but are you worried about all the other species? Sockeye, chum, coho. Do you feel like there's a potential that, if we don't do something, this is going to happen to all of them? Like what's going on with Chinook?
Well, I think we always need to be conservation minded when it comes to all of our fish stocks. But the Kenai River Sport Fishing Association that I work for, it was founded back in 1984 because of the concerns surrounding Chinook. Folks thought that they would always be there, like you mentioned. And there's a high commercial fishing presence in this region. And so we have commercial fishermen that are drift gill netters. And then we also have commercial fishermen that are set gill net fishermen. So they're putting these nets out right along the pathway of returning Chinook to their spawning grounds. And so this association came together with their concerns and started advocating on behalf of the fish. We needed to put protections in place so that we are allowing the Chinook and other species to make it to their spawning grounds. And they have, an economic impact to this community as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So 1984, it was founded, and that was, who was the founder originally?
A man by the name of Bob Penney. He bought some property on the Kenai, had a taste of those gigantic Kenai salmon. They just make them different in this river
Yep.
system, and they can grow all the way up to 97 pounds. And he saw the importance of saving this stock, saving this specific run of Chinook. They're too special to just let it go away and let it disappear.
Yeah.
It's the commercial fishery isn't targeting the Chinook. They're targeting this huge run. Like I said, millions of sockeye that are coming in. And unfortunately, when you lay out a gill net near the mouth of these rivers, you're also going to incidentally harvest Chinook salmon.
Yep. That's it. So you have that going in. And I know Adam, shout out to FishHound Expeditions. Adam was on and he talked about that because he talked about his experience going to Washington, D.C. I'm not sure if you were involved in that, but he talked about going to Capitol Hill, right? And then trying to get the word out about what's going on. Give us an update, like where we're at. So you mentioned 1984, KRSA is founded. That's how many years, right? That's many years ago. What's been going on? Like now,
40 years ago.
40 years ago. So in 40 years, have you guys been tracking the Chinook? Is this a surprise what's going on now the last 5 years with all these? I mean, maybe describe what's going on right now with the Kenai on status, and then are you surprised with what's going on?
No, there's not a surprise. It's a really tragic situation where we're seeing declines of Chinook all across Alaska, but specifically in our region, in Gulf of Alaska, Cook Inlet region, to all the river systems here. Offshore, what's happening in the ocean is affecting the returns. And, back in 1984, back in the 90s, KRSA got together. We were looking at fixing the allocative issue with these species that are returning so that we can ensure sustainability. We can ensure that they're coming back to the spawning grounds, and that, when the fish come back and they return, they spawn, and then they go back out. If we have more fish, then everybody wins. Then there's no squabbles, there's no fight over the salmon. And so this association started what we called paired restrictions, or suggested them to management so that they have the tools to be able to make action in season with our salmon runs.
Right.
So
Action
paired
meaning,
restrictions
yeah.
means, if there's no in-river fishery for sport fishermen, then if we're seeing a closure, then they should see a closure as well to protect the stock.
Gotcha. And is that occurring currently? Has that been occurring?
Yes. So that's occurring in state waters with, Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And KRSA has advocated for, a step down with paired restrictions. And the current situation right now, it's pretty ugly. We're at closed. There is no in-river fishery. There is no saltwater fishery. There's no sport, and there's no calm. These fish need to get into the river.
Has say this over the last 10 years or whatever time period, how many times has this happened, or what does it look like with the closures?
So these closures have just come about in the last couple years.
Yep, a couple years. Okay. And is this related? You mentioned ocean conditions. Is this something where that's a big part of what's going on? Can you look back? I mean, we've talked about steelhead on this podcast too, in BC and other areas, well, around the whole Pacific Rim, where we're seeing declines in steelhead, right, and things. But what is your take? Obviously, you've got commercial fishing. Why do you think we are? Do we know why we're at this point right now?
I think if we knew the answer, we would have the solution.
Yeah.
And we're just doing everything that we can to ensure that ensure protections are in place, and then also ensure that when they do enter the river system, we're paying attention to the habitat, making sure they have a good home to rear and to also spawn. And that's a big part of what we do as well.
Yep, that's it. I always try to simplify things as much as I can, and the 4 H's, is a good way to simplify at least and I'm not sure if this applies up there, but it's the habitat, hydroelectric harvesting, and hatcheries. Those are kind of the things, if you could break down what's going on. So you guys are focusing, you've got the habitat. I know you've done some projects. We talk about those. I don't think hydroelectric is really up in your neck of the woods.
No.
Harvesting obviously is a commercial. That's part of the fishery, the sport and commercial.
And the paired restrictions, I think, plays
Yeah,
in there.
it plays in. And then you also have hatcheries. That's something that Alaska really didn't have a lot of, but are there hatcheries? Is that something that's growing?
Well, I think that the number one, Chinook are really expensive to grow, is what I've been told.
Yeah.
But what we found is if you introduce a hatchery run on top of a struggling wild stock,
Right.
then you're allowing opportunity. Even if it's catch and release, there is mortality associated with that on top of the wild stock.
Yeah.
And so our managers have been wise to hold off on that. And that's, that has been suggested. Why don't we just put hatchery kings
We've
in?
tried it. The lower 48, just look at the states down there and you could see how that doesn't work as well. Right. So it's probably smart doing that.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on something that's bleeding. Let's figure out why we're having difficulties and challenges with this wild stock, and how can we support that, and how can we improve those numbers?
That's perfect. Well, I want to talk a little about some of the projects you do. One of them is really interesting, and I didn't even know about this. Basically, the people walking and creating trails on the banks of the river is really impacting the habitats. You guys have created some structures where people can stay off of those prime habitat. I guess that's mainly for like rearing fish, but can you describe what the problem is there with the trails and how you're addressing that?
Yeah. So like I had mentioned, this river, it's pristine, it's gorgeous. It's host to millions of sockeye that come up in the summer. So as you can imagine, folks flock to it. And about 40% of all the angler days are spent on Kenai freshwater. So what we have done is we've partnered again with local agencies to either leverage or fund river walks or light penetrating boardwalks. So these walkways allow folks access, but it also funnels it in a manner that takes care of that riverbank. And when the boardwalk has light penetrating through it, it allows the vegetation underneath to continue to grow. And that root structure is really what holds that bank together. So without boardwalks, you're seeing, like you had mentioned, foot trails that go along the edge of a bank. Water seeps into that. Alaska, it's cold. It freezes, it expands. And then that trail cuts into the bank and that chunk sloughs off into the water. And we're losing habitat at that point.
Right. So basically it's kind of and this is mainly for the juvenile Chinook and salmon, is where they're using like the grasses, and that's the little habitat that they need to rear in.
Yes. So the velocity of the water will be slowed down. So the juvenile salmon will be able to have protection there, have some shade, hopefully from the vegetation and from predators. And without that critical riparian habitat, they don't have a home.
Right. So you're protecting those. So that's awesome. And so maybe describe some other things, projects or whatever that's keeping you busy out there on some of this, the Kenai.
Yeah, so quite a bit of our efforts are spent, advocating on behalf of anglers, like we had mentioned before, having a professional organization that can speak on behalf of fishermen at the statewide level and, occasionally at the federal level is really key to continuing to have access. But other projects that we're involved with, we do a lot with the youth. So in the springtime, we host Kenai River Spring Cleanup with the local school system here. And we bring kids to these public access sites when the water level is low and, the rocky structure is exposed. So they're able to remove any litter or, man-made objects that might have gotten stuck while folks are fishing, like line, weights, that sort of thing. And so we're preparing the river, for the busy upcoming season before the water comes up. And every fall, we host Kids Junior Classic event. There's about 100 children that participate. We bring them down to the Kenai. We have an educational fair where other agencies and organizations come. We do knot tying. We do water boating safety, life jacket fittings. And then they go out and they spend a few hours on the water. Sometimes this is their first time fishing. So
Yep.
we get some really excited kids, and there's lots of high fives and hugging of salmon.
Yeah. Yeah. The kids are probably maybe the most important thing, right? Because these are the people, the kids that are eventually going to be
Right.
making the decisions and voting and doing all that stuff. So that's great.
These are the future anglers and the future stewards of this resource.
Yeah.
So anytime there's a touch point with the kids, I think it's great.
It seems to me that, there's obviously always politics. We're in this environment of crazy politics, but it seems to me like Alaska, everybody knows. I mean, if Alaska is known for anything, like salmon, bears, moose, you mentioned them, but salmon's got to be like top, right, of the list with bears. But it seems like so everybody would be on board with this. And I know you mentioned off air that you're maybe talking to the lieutenant governor about some stuff, but how does that look? Do you feel like all of the politics, all the people who are in a leadership position understand what's going on and everybody's on the same page, or is that part of the problem?
Gosh, that's a loaded question if you ask me.
Yeah, okay.
That's how volatile fish politics are in
Right.
Alaska.
So it isn't clear cut. It isn't clear cut, Jack, just saying like, well, we've got a major issue with Chinook. Let's, close fishing for everything for a while. Like, well, I guess they're doing that. And then what's next?
Right. And so I think where the argument and the challenge is the different user groups. Who is shut down or are all shut down? So there is a significant amount of revenue that's generated from commercial fishing and from the sport fishing aspect. And then we also have, subsistence users, which take priority in the state.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a challenge. There's not enough fish to go around for everyone. So how do we navigate those waters?
Yep. Do you ever see that this is happening with steelhead a little bit because you're seeing closures on, the Skagit River and different rivers, and people are talking about, and BC is a good example for steelhead. I mean, they talk about some big fish, there's massive steelhead in the Skeena Basin, but it's pretty much catch and release. Do you feel like, catch and release, a fishery like that would be, is that something that's being talked about as a potential? Because again, the challenge is that if you lose, you don't want to take people off the water completely because they start to forget about these fisheries, right? Once Chinook, but what are your thoughts there? Do you think there's some creative things you could do that might allow people to still fish, or is that not?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's way to, ethically release trout or sometimes salmon. So in the Kenai, I typically fish like a barbless hook if I'm catch and release. I make
Yep.
sure that I have the appropriate gear. I'm not going to be, playing a fish for a long time. I generally fly fish.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's a lot easier, a lot smoother on them, on the trout that I'm releasing. And then, I use a rubber net. There's different ways to fish to take care of the resource and to reduce mortality in catch and release, which I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for myself, I mean, I like probably a lot of people. I love eating salmon. I mean, it's my favorite thing. But I also love catching them, and so I haven't done a lot of it. But I mean, I could just like this year, we're heading up. Shout out again. We're doing this. Part of this program we're doing here is we're going to be doing I'm actually going to be driving up to Alaska. From the lower 48, and we're
wow.
We're going to be doing a trip with the family, but we're going to meet up with Adam and FishHound, and we're going to do, that's what we're doing right now, the giveaway that actually, as we're talking this week, it just launched. So this giveaway, one lucky person is going to win an all expense paid trip up to Alaska. I'm going to meet him up there. We're going to do a cool thing. But for me, it's not about killing fish at all, right? I'm going to go up there. If I can get a fish, if there was a Chinook, of course, but anything, I'm going to release it. I feel like that's a big thing in fly fishing. People just kind of expect that. Do you think if you said that to the conventional anglers that people would still fish the catch and release, or do you think that maybe people wouldn't? I'm sure right away it would not go off well, but what are your thoughts there?
I think, promoting education within the fishery of, how to handle fish, how to release them. We have seen that on the Kenai. Like I said, the kings have been declining now for over a decade.
Yeah.
They've been closed for the last couple of years, but, release it right. Here's some common tips on how to handle a large Chinook. And, and typically the larger Chinook are the females. Those are the moms that are going to go put those eggs down on the gravel.
Yeah.
So, don't pull them all the way out of the water. Make sure you've got appropriate tools to make it a quick release.
Yeah, that's it. No, and I think that's for any fishery, that's probably, we've talked muskie, the same thing there, that they think that's a big part of it, just helping people understand how to release the fish. And, like, I always go back to steelhead, because we've even talked on the podcast, talked about people say, hey, and these places like the Skagit, other places where they've closed the fishery, the Thompson, they've said, hey, why not let people go fish with a fly, but cut the hook off? So literally, right, you're swinging a fly without a hook, so you can still see the fish, on the surface come up for the fly. So that's the extreme, obviously. But I think people are, and I agree, I think that once you close things down for a certain amount of time, people eventually forget about it. I wonder, right, could you ever forget about Chinook? If it was closed for 5 or 10 years, would people be like, well, it's easy to forget about. I'd imagine it's different in Alaska, right, because Chinook is such a big species.
If I could wave my magic wand and know what the future held for us, I wish we could have been more cautious in the beginning. Yeah. Like, put restrictions on earlier, promote catch and release, ethical catch and release sooner, before you're in the grave, trying to dig yourself out. Right. But, we're seeing change in the fishery. We're seeing, the next generation that's coming in. We're seeing more fly anglers versus conventional here in my community. And so we're seeing a different group of individuals that weren't about filling the fish box, that, weren't looking to, get their bag limit, so to speak. They were just looking to get out on the water and have a good time and enjoy Alaska. And like you said, if I get a fish, oh my gosh, my lucky day. I feel so fantastic that I was able to fool that one little trout into biting.
Yeah, that is a nice thing, because there's even though with the Chinook, the downturn, you still have these rainbows are unbelievable. The spotted.
Oh yeah.
Right, these spotted rainbows.
The Kenai rainbows. I mean, they can be all the way up to 30 inches here. I mean, it's
oh wow,
it's a phenomenal fishery. It's world class. And if that's all you do on the Kenai, you are going to have a fantastic time.
Yeah, well, and that's what we're shooting for on this trip. Probably rainbows is going to be a big part of it, and some other salmon species. But we're going to be fishing heading up. And I guess I don't know the whole Kenai basin, but we're going to be fishing with FishHound up there, and they fish. We're doing the road system, so I'm trying to think. It's Willow Creek, right?
Yeah, you got a variety, especially if you're driving the Alcan.
Yep.
So you're going to have all of the lake system. You're probably going to be targeting grayling, which are so excited. They hit top water. And then you're going to get down into that Anchorage kind of Matsu region and those smaller river systems like Willow Creek. And then when you get towards Kenai, you got Quartz Creek. You could walk and wade. And then you hit the Kenai, and the Kenai has 3 distinct sections. You've got your upper region, and then you've got, which is a drift only section. Lots of bald eagles. You have federal land, so there's like no structures. You still got the road kind of going by, peeking out here and there between the trees. And then you have like a canyon, which is not accessible at all. You only by boat. And then you open up to Ski Lac Lake, which is another glacially fed lake, through the Harding ice field. And this is what creates the huge sockeye runs that we have.
Oh, right.
And so you'll have to motor through that lake, and then you begin the middle region of the Kenai. So right at the outlet of this gigantic lake, that's trout time.
Oh, right.
That's a really good system right there, or section of the river. And then you get into the lower, which is where most folks like to catch the anadromous fish. So you've got
Soldotna.
coho. Yeah, right. In Soldotna proper, you've got a lot more folks that are fishing sockeye, and then coho, and used to be kings.
Yeah. Okay. So that's it. Yeah. How do you pronounce that? Ski Lac Lake?
Ski Lac.
Oh, Ski Lac. Yeah, Ski Lac. There it is. Okay. And that's the thing. People could hop on from Anchorage. They fly in and just hop on Highway 1, right? Just head south, right? Mm-hmm. Right down through Portage. Into,
our highways. I don't know why it even says one.
Well, right. It's one highway. That's it. Yeah, it's the only highway that
Yeah,
goes up or north or
just
south.
go south and you'll have a great time.
Yeah, that's perfect. No, this is really awesome. So that's what we're going to be doing. And now in the Kenai, so we're going to be up on Willow Creek, which is not. I'm just trying to get my bearings. That's different from. That's in the not the Kenai. That's in the other basin, the Susitna, right? Which is a different basin.
Yep, that's up north from me.
Yeah.
So that's closer to Anchorage. And that's where FishHound is primarily based out of, is my understanding. I've actually, when I met Adam, I met him on the Kasilof River, which is, I like to call it Kenai's little sister.
Uh huh.
It's much smaller. It's off of, again, and it has a great sockeye return, great sockeye run. It's fed by the Testamina Lake.
Okay. And it all flows into the same. I mean, Anchorage is right there on the point, but you've got this big. Is the bay? Is
This is
that
all the Upper
Kenai?
Cook Inlet.
Cook Inlet. That's the Cook Inlet.
Yeah, and that's called Upper Cook Inlet region.
Gotcha. That's what it is. So Upper Cook. So basically, Susitna flows in from the north. Kenai flows in from more of the south, but they're all flowing in. It makes sense that because I think the Susitna has been impacted, right? Probably the whole Cook Inlet from the Chinook.
Correct.
Gotcha.
We're seeing the Chinook declines across Cook Inlet.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, this has been a good quick summary on what you have going. Do you want to shed light on anything else that we haven't talked about today? Maybe some other projects, or maybe what you have going the next year, or maybe just your thoughts overall about. I always love to go back to the optimistic thing versus pessimistic, because I'm maybe as a fisherman you have to be optimistic. I'm kind of that way. I feel like we still have some things we can do. What's your feeling on the Chinook and where we're headed?
I'm optimistic. I'm hoping that, folks can do their part to be active, to get involved with the advocacy side of our fisheries. So if you can visit, KRSA.com, KRSA.com, sign up to be a member. It's free to join. It's lifelong. We send out email reminders when there's opportunities for the public to weigh in, and also to just let you know about things that are happening in the world of fisheries in our local area. We do have a major project coming up. We're partnering with Alaska State Parks. We're going to be restoring and improving a pretty heavily accessed state rec site. So currently, right now, there's just an observation deck overlooking the Kenai and a floating dock for boat users to come and use the restroom facilities. And what's happened is folks are making their way to that observation deck, jumping off of it, or plowing through the vegetation, creating this trail system that's harming the habitat. So we're partnering with the state of Alaska. We've got some grants together, and we're going to be putting in that light penetrating boardwalk. We're going to put stairwells. We're going to provide parking off site, across from the river, away from it. And this will increase opportunity and access, which is pretty unheard of on the lower Kenai.
Yeah.
A lot of times the land is just sold into private hands and access is cut off. So having this new opportunity is amazing, and we're really looking forward to restoring and improving.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I do think it is small. Well, it's small groups and small steps that will get us there, right? It feels like. Are there other groups in your area that are doing good stuff for, kind of helping to protect the species and similar to what you're doing?
Yeah, so the National Fish Habitat Partnership, you may be familiar with this organization. We have a local chapter down here, the Kenai Peninsula chapter. They partner with folks in the area, other, NGOs, 501c3s, and we come together and we work on projects and we work on advocacy efforts.
Nice. Well, we'll put a link out to them as well. What is I had a couple other notes here. The Kenai Classic, is that something that's still ongoing up there? Maybe describe what that is.
Sure. So the Kenai River Classic functions as not only an educational opportunity for KRSA to get together with our local policymakers and philanthropists, but it's also the fundraiser that supports our nonprofit. So in conjunction with the Kenai River Classic, we're going to have about 150 folks that we fish over a 3-day period. We are hosting the National Roundtable on Sport Fish Policy. We partner with Yamaha Right Waters to introduce this forum. It's open to the public. We've got some great speakers. Our friends at American Sport Fishing Association,
Mm-hmm.
their Pacific Fisheries Policy Director is going to be attending and speaking. We've got some folks from the local tribal entity from Chalista Corporation. They're going to be talking about MMPA and protecting our in-river fisheries and how that plays out. So you and I had talked off air about policy in the lower 48 and how it translates up to Alaska. There's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of lessons that, perhaps could be learned. Like you had mentioned on the Columbia, how is Section 120 and the MMPA, how is that relating to your guys' seal population?
Right.
And is that something that maybe Alaska could look into to help protect our Chinook that are trying to enter the Kenai or the Kasilof?
Right. That would make sense. Yeah. Then the ASA, Connor Bevan, we had on episode 604. Put a link in the show notes to that. It was great. Yeah, they're doing a ton of good stuff too. I think that's the thing. There's a lot of great groups out there doing it. So I feel like, we got to keep doing it to get there. Do you think that's the secret? What is the secret to success here? Is it just to keep doing what we're doing to hopefully, that's going to get us back to where, or do you think there's some natural fluctuation in the ocean that's going to change, next year or 2 years from now? It's going to change everything.
I think the secret to success is forming these partnerships,
Yeah.
getting groups together, and really relying on research and science and trying to take the emotion out of it.
Yeah.
How better can we take care of our fisheries? How can we make these sustainable? And by coming together, whether it's the National Roundtable on Sport Fishing in Soldotna, Alaska,
Oh,
of all
wow.
places, where we
Man,
have
I want to go
these
there.
leaders come together and talk about these issues and how we can make improvements, talk about policy decisions, whether it's there or whether it's, down at down at the river, talking to your fellow anglers, getting involved with ASA, getting involved with, Kenai River Sport Fishing Association. This is how we make some changes. This is how we improve our fisheries.
Yeah. So this is great. Well, like we said before, we're going to be doing, this week we're doing a giveaway for somebody to win this trip and a bunch of gear. We're going to be meeting up next year with them, and we're going to be on the water. I'm excited. I'm just as much excited to get back to Alaska as I am just, like everything, right? It's the experience. What is it about Alaska for you that, other than the fishing, what keeps you there? Because Alaska is, right, not easy in the wintertime. Have you thought about, ever leaving, or what do you love most about it?
Gosh, I think Alaska is just in my blood.
Yeah.
Being born and raised here, I can't even imagine living anywhere else.
You've never thought about moving anywhere else?
No, I've never thought about moving. It's funny you say that Alaska's like this bucket list place for fishermen to go. For me, it's Florida.
Oh, there you go.
That's Alaska's bucket list fishery.
There you go, Florida.
So I'll go and I'll visit. I'll go fly fishing the flats, or I went down to Ishkalak this year. I went to Mexico and did some fishing down there for permit.
Yeah.
But just to visit.
Yeah, just to visit.
I can't handle the heat.
No, the heat's tough. Yeah. So the winters, when it gets down, like, below 0, 40 below or something like that, what are you doing when it's like that? Are you just hunker down, like just not going outside?
No. It's called ice fishing.
Oh, so you are out. So you're out when it's cold as can be. You're out there still doing it.
Yeah. I think that's the key to living in Alaska year round. You got to have your winter activities. And of course, I'm a diehard fisherman. So we like to take our snow machines out to the local lake systems and drill a hole, set up camp, and catch some trout.
Wow. What would be a time where you would be, maybe it's too cold to be out there camping in the winter?
When it's below 0. Usually when we take the snow machines out, we have to tow a sled behind us. And I'm a bit of a wild child, and I crashed the sled and broke all of my stuff because it was so brittle outside or so bitter cold.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm going to think twice about going out. below zero again. It cost me a lot of equipment.
Oh, right. So there you go. Yeah. I was up in Fairbanks many years ago, and I remember I think it was like 55 below zero or something it said on the,
Yeah.
and I was outside for, I think like maybe 10 or 15 minutes just going from the car or whatever, and my nose hairs froze up, and I just felt like, you're not outside much when it's that cold, right? That's just,
No.
yeah.
No. And then when you go to the store or the brewery, like everybody just leaves their cars running there.
Oh, they do. They leave them running.
Yeah. I've only gone up to Fairbanks in the winter twice.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot more.
It's colder.
It's colder than my central
Right.
Alaska region is, Central Peninsula. But I do remember getting off the flight, walking outside, and then my fingertips freezing to the door handle because my hands were a little clammy.
Ooh, that's not good.
That was my eye opener
Right.
to how cold it is in Fairbanks.
But on the other end of it, you have like right now, you were in July, August, you're talking, it doesn't get really dark, right? How does it feel right now? Do you love this time, like this period right now?
I am up and about, working, playing, recreating. I burn the candle at both ends in July.
Yeah.
I think it's just what folks do here. And then in the wintertime, I'm less active.
Yeah.
Because it is so dark, when it's dark when you go to work and dark when you get off, you tend to just get into like jammy mode and
Right.
make dinner and then watch some TV and go to bed.
That's it.
Yeah. But here I'm like, I almost did this podcast from the boat launch.
Yeah.
I wanted to squeeze in a couple of hours of trout fishing before my afternoon meeting. And then I have plans tonight, and then maybe I'll run the boat later.
Yeah.
It's just,
love it.
That's what you do in Alaska. You just try to soak up all that sun and all that salmon.
Yeah, it's so good. Cool. Well, leave us with maybe 3 takeaways from, somebody's listening now, kind of towards the end. What would we want them to do right now, given what we talked about? Obviously, we don't have all the answers, but maybe what are a few things people can do right now to help and turn this around?
Like I mentioned before, I think joining Kenai River Sport Fishing as a member,
Yep.
help promote stewardship of the resource, and then do your part. When you're at the river and you see trash or you see litter or you see somebody who's not handling the fish in a sustainable manner, speak up or pack it in, pack it out, do your part.
Yep, that's perfect. And that applies really to anybody around, right? Any state in the country, find your local group, support them, sign up, get involved, volunteer, right? Do you guys have volunteer opportunities where people can actually get out and volunteer?
Yeah. We've got some opportunities, with our youth activities and our Kenai River Classics. So there's always ways to lend a hand, lend your time or lend your money.
Yeah, that's it.
There's ways to also support.
Time or money. That's perfect. Okay. Good, Shannon. Well, I think we'll leave it there for now. We've got a lot of good stuff coming here. We'll send everybody out to KRSA.com and then connect with you there by email as well. And thanks for all your time. This has been very helpful. I think we're all sitting here loving, we love the fish species, right, in our areas in Alaska. And I think sometimes it feels like, you're stuck with not much to do. But I think, like you said, join your local group is a good start. So I appreciate all the time today, and we'll look forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah, appreciate it.
What is the call to action today? Reach out to Shannon at KRSA.com and let them know you heard about this podcast. And you can reach out to your local group in your area if you have a sport fishing association. You can connect with the ASA, the American Sport Fishing Association, and you can support them and find out who is in your local area that you can connect with and maybe help support. Okay, we got a big trip going on right now. If you want to head to Alaska with us, we got that going with FishHound. I mentioned at the start, we are going to be doing a Fishing the Road system in Alaska, and we got a big giveaway going on. But if you want a chance at this, send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com, and then you can find out how to get a chance to fish up there with me and the crew and get a chance at a giant rainbow and salmon and everything that Alaska has to offer. All right, what's coming up next? We got Camden Glade on the podcast. Camden is a biologist that studied muskie eating and feeding behaviors. He's going to talk about the actual behaviors of muskie up in the Michigan area, and then how what we should know about this and how some of the misconceptions that are around the country that muskie just eat everything. In fact, he's going to shed light that they eat a lot fewer of the game fish species that we know of. And it's going to be an awesome one that's coming out this week. Stay tuned for that. All right, I'm out of here. Hope you have a great afternoon. Hope you have a great morning or a great evening, wherever you are in the world. Looking forward to seeing you on that next episode.